In the year 801, an elephant walked into Aachen. His name was Abul Abbas, a diplomatic gift from Harun al-Rashid, Caliph of Baghdad, to the most powerful ruler in Western Europe, Charlemagne. Frankish courtiers, most of whom had never seen such an animal, watched it lumber through the gates. Two of the three great successor civilizations to Rome were exchanging pleasantries. This was the apex of Carolingian power. Charlemagne was negotiating imperial marriages with Constantinople. The Saxons were pacified. Spain was partly conquered. And within 5 years, Charlemagne himself would draft a plan to chop this empire into 3 pieces. Without even mentioning the imperial title, the empire wasn't going to fall to external enemies. It was hollow from within. On the elephant was a symbol of reach, but reach is not the same as grip. To understand why, compare 3 large empires that claimed Rome's legacy. The Roman Empire had 250,000 miles of paved roads, a professional bureaucracy, and centuries of civic identity. People thought of themselves as Roman. The Abbasid Caliphate inherited Persian administrative traditions, operated sophisticated postal and intelligence networks, and built Baghdad from scratch as a purpose-designed capital. The Carolingian Empire had almost none of this. Few towns, roads that were crumbling remnants of Roman construction, no professional civil service, no tradition of loyalty to an abstract state. The empire was held together by personal relationships between Charlemagne and his nobles. Personal relationships don't scale. Right? The bigger the territory, the weaker the bonds that held it together. Charlemagne knew this. In 802, he required every free man in the empire to swear an oath of personal loyalty, not just to obey the law, but to commit to the emperor's cause as a sacred duty. The key line reads, "The Lord Emperor cannot exercise his vigilance or powers of correction over every man." The emperor is admitting in his own legal document that he cannot watch his own subjects. The oath tries to compensate. It fuses political loyalty with religious obligation, making disobedience not just treason but sin. Charlemagne claimed responsibility for his subjects' salvation. This fusion of politics and theology is distinctly medieval. It's also a confession of weakness dressed as authority. Without infrastructure, governance must be delegated. Charlemagne appointed counts and dukes to administer regions on his behalf. Counts, not hereditary nobles, but royally appointed officials like regional governors. In theory, a count held an office, a position of public trust granted by the king, revocable at any time, and not inheritable. The count collects taxes, renders justice, and raises troops, all in the king's name. Here's the problem. In a world without roads, postal systems, or professional inspectors, the count is the only authority anyone in his region ever sees. He is the law. The king is a distant ruler. This creates a fatal distinction, the difference between office and property. An office serves a higher authority. Property belongs to its holder and passes to heirs. The entire empire will pivot on whether that line holds. The empire couldn't watch its own officials, and it gets worse. Those officials were about to become untouchable. Here's how the conversion worked step by step. A count is appointed to a region. He collects taxes, administers justice, commands local troops. Over years, he builds a network of local loyalty. The people owe him, not a distant emperor they've never met. He starts treating tax revenues as personal income. He marries his children into other powerful local families. When he grows old, he claims the right to pass the position to his son. The son inherits, and now the county is no longer an office, it's a possession. Charlemagne's own capitularies, royal administrative orders sent to local officials, repeatedly condemn this corruption. Counts seizing church lands, counts ignoring royal instructions, counts treating public duties as private rights. The documents lament it over and over, but lamenting is not the same as stopping. and no one could stop them because of the castle. When a local lord fortifies his position with stone walls, the military calculus shifts decisively. Medieval siege technology, catapults, trebuchets, battering rams, required enormous resources and was shockingly ineffective against stone. A lord inside a castle could defy the king with near impunity. The asymmetry was brutal. Building a defensible castle took modest local resources. Besieging one required a massive army, sustained supply lines, and months of effort with no guarantee of success. The castle made the conversion of office into property physically irreversible. No king could afford to besiege every defiant count. Gunpowder artillery wouldn't tip the balance back towards central authority for another 5 centuries. The castle is the seed of feudalism. Now the most revealing detail. In 806, just 6 years after his imperial coronation, Charlemagne drafted the partition of Thionville. It divided the realm among his 3 sons. Charles gets the Frankish heartland and the north. Pepin gets Lombardy and Bavaria. Louis gets Aquitaine and the southwest. This follows the old Frankish custom of partible inheritance, dividing lands among all legitimate sons, treating the realm as family property rather than a unified state. The stunning detail, the document makes no mention of the imperial title. None. The restored Roman Empire proclaimed with such ceremony in 800 is simply absent. Charlemagne reverted to Frankish tradition as though the imperial coronation had never happened. The implication is enormous. Charlemagne himself appears to have seen the empire as a personal honor, not a permanent institution. The Carolingian Empire's failure is not a story about one man's bad planning. It's a case study in the difference between conquest and governance. Charlemagne could conquer vast territories through military genius and personal charisma, but without roads, towns, bureaucracies, and a deeply shared idea of the state, he was building on sand. The Vikings, yes, they raided, they burned, they terrorized, but they were an accelerant, not a cause. The structural weaknesses predated them. The conversion of office into property would define European politics for centuries. It became the foundation of feudalism, not a designed system, but an organic growth in the cracks of a failing state. Feudalism wasn't invented. It filled a vacuum. The castle, the hereditary fief, the local lord who is the law, all of it grew from the cracks visible in Charlemagne's empire at its peak. Above the surface, a crown, an imperial title, diplomatic reach from Baghdad to Constantinople. Below, no infrastructure, no bureaucracy. Officials converting public roads into private possessions, castles that made them untouchable. The elephant from Baghdad was a symbol of Charlemagne's reach, a reach spanning from Catalonia to Saxony, from Aachen to the courts of 2 rival empires. But reach is not the same as grip. The Carolingian Empire could touch the edges of the known world. It couldn't hold a count accountable 200 miles from Aachen.